Hi, everyone. My name is Roxy Jahangiri, and I'm coming live to you from the WeWork in downtown Washington, D.C. I am part of the DC Startup Week team and so excited to have all of you participate in today's programming. Thank you for joining us. DC Startup Week is an amazing 5-day conference every September focused on building the startup community. And we wanted to give a quick shout out to our title sponsors, Next, Insperity, West, and Technology Rivers. You're all on mute right now, just so you know. And Adam, our speaker, will be able to unmute you as you ask questions. So if you have any questions, please make sure to use the comment box below, and we'll make sure we keep an eye on it. And then Adam can go ahead and unmute you to have more of that engaging conversation. We just didn't want to have any problem with the background noises or anything like that. We're so thrilled to have Adam Mutschler speak on Develop Your Phoenix Strategy, Reinvisioning Your Business in an Unpredictable World. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. We're very honored to have you here and very much looking forward to your talk. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Adam to the DC Startup Week stage. And off to you.
Thank you so much. This is such a different experience than the last several years of DC Startup Week. There are people here that I've met before. There are mostly people here I haven't. So if you know me, you know that I love being with other humans and I love connecting and I love learning from other people. And so the virtual world has created incredible opportunity to normalize connecting with people across boundaries, but also completely changed how we have conversations. And so I'm going to do my best to create as much conversation today as possible. I have 56 minutes. If I want to stick to my time really tight, my presentation will not go that long. My intention is, and I'm going to actually add a second display here for myself. My intention is to go over some of the content, but really leave as much space as humanly possible for Q&A, or as much as possible, because that's kind of where I thrive. And so I'm just going to get myself set up here and put all my Zoom stuff on my display. So if you see me looking to off screen, that's because that's where my Zoom chat function is going to be. Present here. And I'm going to share my screen and we're going to kick off. And if you have any questions, please feel free to chat them and let us embark on this. Hold on. Brandon. All right. Perfect. Can everyone see, just like head nods or thumbs up, can you see my screen? Can you see the TKG, your Phoenix strategy? Not a lot of videos, so yep, I got a yep there. Great. Awesome. So Phoenix strategy, leveraging this moment to transform your offer. There are a lot of things that have changed in our world, and I cannot cover all of it, and I can't really discuss the depth of the shift that we've all experienced in the last 6 months. It's been very jarring. It's been devastating for some people. Obviously, it's also a great tragedy in our society and in the global community. But there are opportunities everywhere, even in tragedy, even in struggle. And entrepreneurship has a history of innovating through really the toughest times in society. And so I was having some conversations in March and May, and I really felt like the world at that point was already on fire, and it's quite literally on fire now. So this analogy might be a little too close to home if you're on the West Coast. But what comes out of destruction? What comes out of immense challenge? And the analogy of the Phoenix really stood out to me, in the sense that, you know, out of the ashes, how do we rise? Out of the ashes, how do we fly? And I'm going to do my best to do that analogy justice. And where are the captions? That's a good question. I didn't set that up. That's an important thing to address, though. I would message Roxy. Sorry for the interruption, but for logistical questions like that, I would message Roxy. So I'm going to try and do this subject justice. Please ask questions throughout, and I will look to my chat and try and respond to them as much as possible. All right, so who am I? I had a little bit of an introduction here, not in an existential way. We don't have enough time to go over that, but maybe in another conversation if you want to hit me up one-on-one. My name is Adam Mutschler. I'm based in the DC area. I grew up in Maryland. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I mean that quite literally. Everyone in my family has started or run a business or businesses and still do. And so entrepreneurship is my blueprint. Working for other people is not my blueprint. And so a lot of the way that I look at the world and the way that I think about challenges actually come from my family history of watching people build businesses. So I'm a partner in a family business, the Kedar Group. We do executive coaching and leadership development work. We work with small businesses, big businesses, government offices, high growth tech companies. We work with everyone. I'm a founder. I've started a couple businesses, some of them revenue generating, some of them projects. I host a podcast called The Founder's Mind. And I think of myself as a creator in a lot of ways, and just manifesting things into the world. And we'll talk more about that. So what's happening? I talked about it a little bit a moment ago, but I think it's really important to it's important to be clear about what's going on. So we're going to state the obvious. We're in a period of crisis, and that crisis is different for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons, but we are all in a shared moment of crisis with a global health pandemic and with the world just shifted overnight, and more crises seem to be popping up every day. There are fires on the West Coast. The other day in DC, there was immense flooding, which created a lot of challenges locally. But that's what's happening. And the reality is, we don't know how long it will last. And I think that is important. That's an important detail to just accept and to discuss. We're unsure. There's a lot of uncertainty. And that uncertainty, again, is different for a lot of different people. If you were a bartender at a high-end restaurant living on incredibly high tips and you were making six figures, that went away overnight, right? So your crisis is different than if you are a developer for Facebook who's working remotely from home, right? But we're all still in a version of crisis. And those two pieces, until we come to grips with we're in a period of crisis, we don't know how long it will last, and accept those two details, it'll be hard for us to plan or make any sort of strategic decisions around, well, how are we going to navigate this? And so what can we do? I love that people are it's just like a stream of people joining and coming in. This is amazing. So what can we do? What can you do? And so when I think about coaching or the work that I do or any entrepreneurial endeavor, what worked yesterday may not work today or tomorrow. And I hold that true in many ways. What your company needs from you or your peers need from you in day one on a team or day 100 or 1000 inherently are different. It changes. In the time of crisis, what we've been doing, the things that have worked, often shift pretty quickly. And so one of the things that happened for a lot of people that I talked to in March and in April, and a little bit in February for people that were really paying attention or may have been preemptively impacted, depending on the industry, we lost sight a little bit of what are our core offers, what are our core strengths. So questions to consider: what are your core values? So in a time of crisis, what are your core values outside of crisis, and how do you think about those values in crisis? What are you focusing on? And it's important to remember and get back to those roots. What is your mission? I know that these sound like foundational elements of any business, but it's important to consider and revisit what are your values, what is your mission, and start to see how they fit in a rapidly changing environment. You know, when we get sort of knocked on our backs, sometimes we lose sight of those things. What are your primary offers? So whether you're an individual contributor in a company and you have a set of skills that you offer to your team, whether you're a consultant and you're just an individual freelancer, or you're running a team of people or a business, or you're a founder and you have hundreds of employees, What are your primary offers as an individual to the world, but also what are your company's primary offers? So maybe you had 10 products and services, but really 3 of them were your core primary offers. What are those? And how do you focus on those during these times? And in looking at what are your core values, what is your mission, what are your primary offers, how have these been impacted during this crisis? So one example for the Kedar group, a lot of the work that we did was in-person group workshops. So we would work with teams, sometimes as few as 10, sometimes as many as 120, and we would do these full day, multi-day retreats and workshops that were very immersive in the leadership development space. And those went away. And there's a shift to virtual, no doubt, but it's hard to manage groups across virtual, at least if you're trying to do something very dynamic. You know, I can speak to you all virtually, and there's a lot of people listening, which I appreciate, people taking the time, but it's not the same when you want to go back and forth. And so that was a major impact for the Kedar group. And where we ended up shifting and leaning is a lot more of the one-on-one, smaller group work that can be managed more easily virtually. So that's one example. But think about how are your core values, your mission, and your primary offers impacted during this crisis and potentially future ones. So once you sort of have considered this and started to process, and you may have already gone through this, you know, because we're pretty deep into this now, 7 months. You may have already done some of this work. Who do you serve? So stakeholders. Remember who your core stakeholders are. How are they engaging with you, and how do they typically make decisions? Minus the 2 periods, just 1 period there. But again, when we're not in crisis, when we're winning, when things are rolling, you know, it can be easy to take things for granted or to make assumptions. Well, we understand or things are working. And so this is a really important time to take a breath, pause, and revisit some of these core pieces. Like we said, your core values, your mission, what are your primary offers? And then thinking about your stakeholders, what are they looking to you for? How have they been impacted? It's really easy and natural during crisis to think about, how am I being impacted? What is this doing to me? What is it doing to my business? What are my challenges? When you start to look outward and start to focus on clients, customers, and say, I want to understand what your challenges are during this time, you start to open up the viewfinder a little bit. You start to create possibility for answering some of the challenges that your stakeholders have, and either leveraging existing offers to people you might not have known would need them, or shifting an existing offer to meet a stakeholder's need. But looking outward and starting to ask yourself, what are my peers, what are my colleagues, what are my customers, what are they struggling with, and what do they need? And if you're not sure, ask them. That's so big. I've interviewed hundreds of founders. I've talked to hundreds of people in business, if not thousands. And one very, very common successful behavior is including your customers or your stakeholders in the development of your offer, in the development of your product, asking people what works, what doesn't work, what are they looking for, what do they need right now. Oops. So taking into consideration, what are your core values, what's your mission, starting to swim with this idea of how do they fit in the world that we're living in at the moment, even with all of the unpredictable things that are happening, and starting to think about what are your stakeholders, your customers, your clients, what are they struggling with, puts you in a position and gives you a stronger foundation to say, how can I reframe the offer, or how can I slightly adjust it? It may not need a full reframe. And I'll give some examples, some just like 2 lists: businesses pre-COVID and global pandemic, and what are some of the changes that they've made, just to paint this picture a little bit more. I'll talk about the Kedar group briefly. People need one-on-one contact more than they needed it before. People need one-on-one support more than they needed it before. And so by shifting away from all of the group work that we were doing, at least everything that didn't translate to virtual, and making ourselves a little bit more available for one-on-one coaching and sourcing more coaches to provide that one-on-one coaching support, we've actually seen an influx in our business this year. And it feels uncomfortable to think about business in this sense sometimes for me, and that's my own baggage. But the Kedar Group is probably going to come out of 2020 with a bigger year in business than in 2019 because of the shifts that we made and because of our agility in responding to customer need and what are people looking for. And so in reframing your offer, you may already have everything you need, which holds true for my business. When re-envisioning your offer, consider new techniques to leverage your products and services that closely align with your core values and mission. You can thumbs up, you can raise your hand, you can do anything on the screen. I would be shocked if at least 50% or not more than 50% aren't just emotionally or mentally exhausted by what's happening in the world. So you could just like raise your hand, like, are you fatigued from what's happening in the world and with COVID? And in thinking about that, we have to ask ourselves, are we filtering our activities and our business initiatives into places that align closely with our core values and mission? Because when we focus on the things that we're hyper passionate about, we derive energy, we create energy. It is not as draining. And I don't know about you all, but I can't handle more draining things right now. I can really only fine tune everything I'm doing towards things that are really resonating for me, because the world is draining enough. And in pre-COVID, pre-crisis world, yeah, I could put up with stuff that I don't want to do, or I could put energy towards something that I said, you know what, maybe we'll try this and we'll see if it works. We'll see if it resonates for customers. We'll give it a go, even though it's not my top priority. I don't have time for that at this point. And so I really encourage, to the best of everyone's ability, ask yourself the hard questions. Does this align with our mission? Is it a core value? Is it generating revenue? We need to just focus on that. All the other stuff becomes a little bit tertiary. So connect and learn. We talked about this a little bit. Connect and learn from your existing stakeholders. Ask them what they need from your business. It can be a little bit of a humble experience to reach out to customers. A lot of people look at themselves and say, I'm providing a product or service. People come to me for an answer or to a solution to a problem. I shouldn't have to ask them. They shouldn't feel like they need to be a part of the solution, but it's a misnomer. Ask people what they need. It will greatly inform any adjustments that you make to your business. Evolve your offer. Your existing products and services are your launching pad. Consider ways to amplify them in the digital world. We'll talk about this a little bit more. Some businesses translate really, really well virtually, like really well. And some businesses don't translate very well virtually. And there are some that may not translate, or you might think that they don't translate, but you can make a leap. One example, honestly, are medical professionals. A lot of medical offices, acupuncture, doctors' offices, even though they can't do the hands-on work that they were trained to do, they can provide a ton of support virtually. And so telehealth is booming. And you might think, well, I go to the doctor for, to get a diagnosis about what's going on with me, but a lot of people are able to get support virtually. And so there's this explosion of telehealth, which is actually huge for people that don't have regular access to medical professionals. And so just thinking about what are ways to make that shift, for the Kedar Group, clearly going all virtual with Zoom and being in our respective spaces was a needed change. And I'll give some examples of some retail businesses and some physical businesses that made some shifts as well. Empathy. The last two pieces are really, really at the core for me of what we need in the world. Empathy, more now than ever. Communicate how your offers are shifting and show that you understand the new challenges. It's so important to show that we understand, or that you understand, or that your business understands what's going on. You can do another raise of hands or a clap or whatever you want. In the beginning of the global pandemic, every retail business was sending an email. Every company was sending some email about how they're dealing with COVID or how they're dealing with the global pandemic. And it was abundantly obvious the companies that literally gave a shit versus the companies that were like, I think we need to write an email. So we're going to send an email saying, we're all in this together and, you know, we're here for you and please buy our product. And those emails were the worst. Like I would get like multiple emails a day from all the different emails that I subscribed to over the years. And every now and then you get an email. Patagonia was a great one. Patagonia almost always hits the mark. Um, they closed their retail stores pretty early. So did Apple. But Patagonia also stopped online sales for a little while to let their employees rest. And they sent an email. They said, we're closing sales for a short period of time. And it really showed through their action. They were indicating, no questions, that they understood the intensity and the impact of what was going on in the world. You know, one company, a clothing company, sent an email that said almost instantly, they're like, everyone's spending more time at home, time to cozy up in our PJs. And it was kind of making light of really a tragedy. And that was a total turnoff, right? So really, as a brand, whether you're an individual, whether you have a product or service that you're offering, showing your customers or your stakeholders that you are aware of the gravity of the situation, of what's going on, and that you're responding to it the best way that you can with the resources and business that you have. The last one echoes this a little bit, similar point, but again, it's worth just honing in on, which is community. With physical distancing and the trauma that this period of crisis is creating, exploring ways to build authentic community. The word authentic for me is a little tough because everyone uses it differently or it's been overused, but really looking at the people that have trusted you with their money, the people that have trusted you with their time and attention, whether again, it's just a small book of clients, 3, 4, 5 clients, or if it's thousands of, you know, members or subscribers, depending on the product or service that you offer, creating that sense of community, creating that camaraderie within a group of people has a lot of potential. And again, showing people that you are aware and thinking about what's happening in the world will create lifelong customers. There are brands that I didn't really feel either way about, but they would say something or do something that made me feel so connected that they understood what it's like to be at home all day, or to not go on vacations, or to live, you know, with people that you didn't think you were going to live with. Maybe you're living with a family member that you didn't think you'd live with. There are some brands out there that really hit the mark, and I'll remember that for a very long time, if not forever. And the brands that missed the mark, I'll also remember that for a very long time, if not forever. And it has changed my buying habits in some situations. And so, an example with the Kedar group, you know, we've started creating more internal resources for clients across companies. So we've been connecting more clients with each other. We've created opportunities to work with, sort of in a free way, provide resources for clients. We had a leading through crisis call that we hosted for clients that was, again, client agnostic. Anyone could join, but it was provided to our clients. There are a lot of little things that you can do that can really create that space. So we're going to go through a handful of befores, businesses. And again, if any questions come up, let me know. We're getting close to the Q&A. And I kind of powered through this one because I think everyone gets exhausted of being on Zoom all day. And I know this is a virtual conference, so I appreciate everyone's time and attention and energy. So we're going to go through some before and after examples, or before and now, I should say. And then we'll just jump to the Q&A, and I would love to get some chat questions going, and I'll do my best to answer as many as possible. And I'll also put my email and LinkedIn so that you all can reach out to me or hit me up if you want to talk more after this. I'm very responsive. So here's some examples of businesses before the global pandemic hit. Coffee shops, acupuncture practice, which I highlight because my dad had an acupuncture practice, mail order nail polish, restaurants, in-person education, retail stores, clothing brands, real estate. These are all businesses that were particularly impacted and particularly vulnerable to people not going places, or people engaging in different ways. So I'm not going to go one by one. We'll just have two blanket examples before and after. Coffee shop. So La Colombe is a great example. They had a bunch of they have a bunch of coffee shops on the East Coast. I don't know if they extend beyond. They pretty quickly shifted their energy to shipping coffee, deliveries, shipping cold brew, 5-pound bags of coffee. Their online shipping really, their direct to consumer moves really took off, and they focused their communication around that. They focused their product offerings around that. And for me as a customer of theirs in person, it made a very, very nice transition, but it was also like really convenient. Acupuncture practice. So this is a personal note. My dad has an acupuncture practice that he'd actually been considering winding down, but when COVID hit, his lease was up already in April, and so that was the end of his physical practice. But he started offering virtual health support, and he started offering resources remotely. And I couldn't give acupuncture, he couldn't put needles in people, but he did maintain his ability to provide support and resources to clients and even new customers. I put the mail order nail polish in here because it's also important to acknowledge that there are a lot of businesses that existed before that are booming. There's a nail company called Olive and June, and I had a chance to speak to the founder, Sarah, and their online ordering for nail polish. They just got into retail this year, but they were always online. And her whole piece was, kind of the proliferation of at-home manicures. And so again, her business set up to be virtual, remote, direct to consumer, and has had a moment to take off. Right? Restaurants, early days in DC. I don't know if anyone paid attention to this. Farmers and Fishers, that whole restaurant group and other restaurants, they shifted their restaurants from sit-down restaurants to marketplaces. So all the farmers and the distributors that they used, they started selling their products, and they created a space. They're creating a space for people to go to shop for food that we needed. In-person education is still very up in the air, but we've seen massive shifts to online learning. I would say high school and above is a little bit more seamless. The lower, 8th grade and below, we still have a lot of learning to do, but major overnight shift into virtual learning. Retail stores, obviously e-commerce blew up, contactless delivery. The clothing brands I thought was really interesting. Clothing brands shifting to mask production, PPE production, I thought was, again, a no-brainer. But seeing what people and what companies are doing. And then real estate's interesting because the real estate market hasn't actually been too hard hit yet. But as someone who purchased a home during this pandemic, it was very fascinating talking to real estate agents and doing virtual tours, and even the legality and the signing of documents and due diligence, everything had shifted. And some of it very seamless and some of it painstakingly challenging. But there is this before and now, and for every business, it's going to be slightly different. If you're in the professional services, now is virtual. If you did medical work, it might be a little more complicated. But there are many ways to manifest shifts in how we're working and how we're operating. And these are just a couple highlights. So I just wanted to share these. I'm trying to keep up with all of the people that are jumping in. And we're going to move to Q&A. So there are a couple questions already here. Before we start, I just want to say again, I really appreciate everyone taking the time and energy to come listen to me, share some of the things that I've been learning, share some of the things that I'm thinking about. I really appreciate and respect everyone's energy. And right now it says that there's 70 people on here. And so that's a lot of human energy. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that I've experienced great gratitude and people giving me their time and spending that energy. And so with that, there are a couple questions in here, and I'll start with this one from Masa. How are you seeing human-centric work or business that relies on interpersonal interactions, such as mental health business or social impact companies? That's a really great question. And I would say my work is human-centric. And so I can't speak necessarily to mental health businesses, as it's not my area of expertise. But I will say a couple of things. One, in my line of work and actually in the mental health space, there is some research coming out. The proliferation of the amount of virtual resources that are coming up is having I would say a positive impact. The challenge is there are certain things that you need in person. There are certain things that you can observe in person. And there are certain resources that are just different, right? So over video or over audio, there are things that can be disruptive. But I would say in general, there is an increase in the discussion around mental health and around the humanity of how we work. I don't know if anyone's been on a conference call or on a video chat, and if you have, someone with a kid, there's a kid on the call, or, a parent has to go do something, or maybe you have a boss who doesn't have kids, but they're very buttoned up at work, or a colleague who's very buttoned up at work, but like all of a sudden you're in their dining room and you sort of get a peek into their house, and so there's more humanity coming into our work as a whole right now. And so I think that that's one piece. I think that the social impact, there's a lot. Without going into too much in the US, I think people are thinking a lot more consciously about how they spend their time and the impact it has in the world. I know that I am. I think that this situation has caused a lot of people to question what are they doing with their energy. And I think that there's going to be I'm a serial optimist, so I'll say I think long term, despite the tragedy and loss and pain that is occurring, I think that we are learning so much about ourselves individually and as local communities and as a country and as a globe, that I think that we're going to have some very powerful learnings and shifts that come out of this. That's the serial optimist in me. And I'm going to keep maintaining that belief, maybe for my own sanity, but I believe that there's a lot of potential coming out of this. 67 people, there's got to be more questions out there. So I would love if anyone has any reflections or questions that they want to hit me with. Let's get some more in the chatter. I'll give everyone a second, see if anything comes up. I'm going to take the Q&A. I'm going to take my my screen share off so that we can do more of a seeing each other vibe here. One second. So any other questions? Oh. Hold on. That's good. I struggle to speak to everyone at once, people who are really struggling and those who are actually doing okay. Thoughts. It always feels very cliche, unprecedented times. Yeah, unprecedented times has become exhausting for a lot of people. I think that that's a really good point. I would say that I also struggle with this, and in the way that I struggle with this is kind of similar. Like my business is doing really well, but there are problems in the world. We're having major problems. And so I think when you're thinking about how you communicate with people, I think it's important to be honest and direct, whatever you're communicating about, right? Like I can say things are going really well for me, and it's mentally exhausting living in this time. And I am well aware that things are tragic in many parts of the country and the world. And I think that just kind of owning whatever the story is, whatever your story is, whatever the content or whatever your offer is that you're thinking about, and showing that you understand that there is intense suffering happening, I think goes a long way. It's I don't interpret that your question was this, Christina, but there is definitely, like, trying to please people and make sure that everyone feels heard. Um, that's a hard sort of line to straddle. So the way that I look at it is just say, like, I have to be honest about where things are for me and how things are working. But in addition, being open and supportive to other communities and in ways that I can help. There's a lot of questions that just came in, so I'm going to do my best here. Do I think either audio or video interactions are best or both? Kristen, great question. There are times in my week and day where I'm totally exhausted from being on video. There's no question there. And so I would rather be on a phone call. But the other day, someone was like, hey, I thought we were on the phone. I was like, can we do video? And for me, I wanted that human connection. I wanted to see someone else. I wanted to be connected. So I would say if you're having a heavy conversation or an emotional conversation, or you're looking for a little bit of that, like, human energy, video is probably going to get you there. But if you're at the end of the day and your brain is totally zonked from being on video and you have another meeting, asking someone, hey, can we do this? Can we do this over audio? I mean, creating that space also to say, my eyeballs are going to fall out of my head. So I think it really varies, but I would say that I prefer video because I can see people, but sometimes audio these days is helpful. There are so many free resources right now. How do you choose which digital experiences to give your time? Kayla, I don't digital experiences to give my time. If you're talking about something like DC Startup Week, I'll be biased and say you should definitely give DC Startup Week your time. I've been a speaker here for many years, and it's an incredible community. I have been asking myself recently, why do I spend time on my phone? Does it make me happy? Does it bring me energy? And so to that question, I will say, we should be maniacal about asking ourselves, is this activity, is this action, is this experience bringing me energy? Do I come away from it feeling open and sort of like excited, or am I exhausted? Is it draining? Is it hard for me to stay engaged with it? And for anything that isn't 100% crucial, if it's exhausting, let go of it. I make a strong invitation to let go of things that exhaust you that are not 100% requirements in your life. Like, scrolling through Instagram is not a requirement. If you scroll through Instagram and you find yourself feeling bad about what's going on in your life, stop doing that. And I don't know how else to say it. We don't have the bandwidth to let things take our energy. We have to give our energy to things that in return give us energy. Spending time with my family gives me energy. So I give them energy, and it's a very generative process. Working with my clients gives me energy. It's a very generative process. So focusing as best as we can on that, whether it's digital or analog. Crystal, you talked on how to pivot with a pandemic, but what is your advice with trying to start up a business in the pandemic, especially with the marketing aspect of the startup? Crystal, I love that question. So many businesses come out of intense moments in society. There was a lot of articles in the startup world in the beginning of the pandemic that, like, Airbnb and Uber and all these companies started right when the real estate market was crashing in like 2008, 2009. There are a couple of things. Money doesn't go away. It just changes hands. So when there's a global pandemic or the markets are shifting, it's not that the money is going away, it's just going into different pockets, and sometimes it's going a lot into one pocket. So that being said, there's a lot of resources to start companies. So I would say go for it. I'll give you a really cheesy analogy, and that is, diamonds are created under pressure, but it's true. And so there's a ton of pressure in the world right now. It doesn't mean that you can't find yourself an incredible diamond, especially with the marketing aspect of the startup. I think that is, you need to focus everything that you have with marketing on being show that you are hyper aware of the world that you're building a business in, and show that what you're offering, whatever the offer is, really tie the story to why is it important now, and how does it respond to what's happening to the world now and beyond. I hope that answered your question. I'm going to do really quickly, I'm going to keep answering questions. But if I don't fully respond to your question or you have follow-up questions, please email me, adam@kedargroup.com. I'm very responsive. Brian just hopped on here. He can tell you how responsive I am. But please, please, please email me if you have follow-up questions or if I didn't fully answer it. Christina, that's the approach. Oh, okay. That was a response. I appreciate that. Laura, how would you advise a health worker, massage therapist in transitioning, encouraging, engaging their clients in telehealth support, growing a business on that platform? Laura, that's a great question, directly connected to my dad's world. And I would say that physical and mental health is crazy important every day of society in general, just like outside of what's happening in the world. And I think more people are putting time towards that now than they have before because we are up against a lot more stress in life. And so I would say, and this is for Laura around making that transition, there are so many things, and I'm making an assessment, but I believe there's so many things in massage therapy or any sort of health and wellness that are internal and that have to do with self-care and things that people can do. Like right now, I'm not exhibiting the best posture. My feet are crossed. They're up on a heater that's underneath the desk that y'all can't see. Like, talk to people about what are things that they can do every day, little habits, and you can create accountability groups. You can create resources for clients. I think that that's a great way to say, hey, I want to see you when this is all, sort of a little bit more under control. But here are things that you can do that are good to do even when we see each other. Not that I don't want to see you as frequently as we do, but maybe there are things that you can do that will help your body. I think that that's a big piece. And I think people are trying to explore and understand more in different ways to be proactive about taking care of themselves. And there's a lot of space for people who have that passion to do that. There are great community platforms like Mighty Networks is a closed platform that you can create, which is pretty solid. I would say that. And then please email me if you have more questions. Josephine mentioned that you're a creator and I'm similar. How are you staying focused during this time? Because of this shift, there are also so many new opportunities and spaces that one could dive into. Thoughts, really brief answer. I have a really hard time focusing on one thing. So I start a bunch of things and that's a problem for me. And so where I'm at is stay focused on the things that for every hour that you put into it, you get a very strong return. Again, I don't have the bandwidth to pour myself into things that aren't bringing things back to me, and not just revenue, but like engagement with people or energy. And so, put little flags on the things that you see as opportunities right now, but really focus and double down on the things that are working and build off of that slowly. When I started my business when I was 27, I said, where's it going to be when I'm 35? I didn't even ask myself, where's it going to be in a year or two? I said, where's it going to be when I'm 35? And I'm still working towards that, but I would say, if possible, focus and slowly add layers to what you're doing. Same question as Crystal, starting a business during this. If you have the energy and capacity, I think that there's no right time to start a business. There's almost no wrong time to start a business. There are unlimited examples of businesses that are started at all times of society, and they go in every direction. I mean, there are businesses that started in 2019, which people could argue was the highest run-up of the market and economy in the US in a long time, that failed, right? And so I think it's really about who's the team behind the company, the value proposition that they're putting out there, and how are you responding to whatever your customer or stakeholder needs. Not the most responsive. Thank you, Brian. Totally agree. Kate, do I do a lot of TKG at TKG? Do I do a lot of talking at TKG? Maybe that's what that means. We have another 13 minutes. Okay, cool. Tom, what's the best way to connect with people and build your pipeline in these difficult times? Tom, that's a really good question. I'm a super extrovert. I love going to events. I love things like DC Startup Week. I just like walk around the hallways of whatever space the talks are being held. And I literally will introduce myself to strangers if they don't introduce themselves to me. And I would say this is my formula, and I share it with anyone. If you see someone that's doing something interesting, or you see someone that is in an area that you want to learn more about, just be honest about it and just reach out to them, and you'll see what happens. So I will always reach out to people on LinkedIn or digitally, and I'll say things like, I have been reading the things that you're writing, or I've been following your social, or I saw that this press release and I'm fascinated about what you're working on, or I'd love to learn more about what you're working on. And I'd love to get, 15, 20 minutes, and you start a conversation. There's a mantra that I live by, which is relationships precede results. And people care more about relationships now, I would say, than ever. And so really focusing your energy on how are you consciously building relationships, and getting to understand what challenges people are dealing with, and what are they building and working on. And in doing that, you will be able to much more effectively share what you're doing and working on, and how it might relate to whatever their journey is at the moment. But I would really focus on, you can do those individual outreach, and know that you don't need, or most people, I don't know about you, Tom, I don't need thousands of people to say yes to me. I don't need thousands of people to buy my services. I don't need thousands of people to respond. I just need a couple to have something meaningful happen. Christian, any specific tools or approaches on how to revisit your mission values? Then how would you communicate and connect your customers with a new story and offering? I'm not a huge tools person, and it's not because they're not good. It's actually it's because my brain doesn't work that way, and so it's really living in questions, which is where coaching exists. And so what I would say to that question is, ask yourself questions, which sounds sort of cyclical, but really the ones that I come down to are, what brings you energy? When you do something, what brings you energy? And when something doesn't work in the world, what lights you up? What makes you feel like there's the greatest injustice in the world, right? And those things typically start to indicate what you care about, what your values are, and what your mission should be. So for me, it's understanding. I feel the most positively on fire in a good way when I feel there is immense understanding between people. And that's at the core of coaching. And I actually have my biggest breakdowns personally and professionally when I feel like there's a massive disconnect in understanding. So for me, really, like, core value and mission is like understanding, helping people be more human, and creating understanding. And so, as far as what are tools and approaches, it's really ask yourself the tough questions, be honest with yourself about the answers. Also, be honest with yourself if you don't have the answer. So I would just encourage to have some of those, take time, take a moment, whether it's 5 minutes a day or whether it's an hour in an afternoon, and have some of those conversations with yourself and think about what's coming up, what's resonating. And when you start to define something like that, you can put it out there to the world, whether it's on social, whether it's in a newsletter you have. And if you have existing customers, you can share with them that these are things that you're thinking about. Since this has all gone down, you're thinking more deeply about X, Y, and Z. And you'd love to have a conversation with them. How are they thinking about things? What's their relationship with some of these concepts, or this mission, or these values that you're sharing? Pat, some companies didn't show empathy or take what is going on seriously. What do you think would help salvage those mishaps or build faith, trust? That's really hard, rebuilding faith, especially if you really drop the ball. If there are other companies out there that offer an alternative to a company that really dropped the ball, it's going to be really hard to get someone back. That's my personal opinion. So like when Uber really dropped the ball in like 2012, 13, 14, with all of the internal issues that they were having, and sort of the toxicity that came out, and I shifted to Lyft, there was nothing Uber could really do to get me back, because Lyft didn't drop the ball, and Uber is like Uber, they're everywhere, but they're also, it's just like culturally a different experience. So I would say you're going to have a really hard time if you drop the ball and there's a decent or great competitor out there. Another example is the pajamas comment. There's another clothing company that provides very similar options as they do, and they were really on top of it. Their messaging was phenomenal. So again, it's a major miss. If you are a company like Amazon, and they have ultimate control of their pipeline and customers, it's hard to leave them or drop them forever and not come back. And so one might be your market and the market share that you have, which is unfortunate but true. And then the other is, there's an Emerson quote that I love, which is, your actions are so loud I can't hear your words. And so how do you come back? You got to act. You got to show that that you understand what's going on and that you're working towards creating value that relates to the world today, or show that maybe you made a mistake and you're doing the things to make a difference, and you're doing the things to sort of recover that mistake. That's the closest I can get on that, Pat, but please feel free to email. I'm just reading here. There's some good tips, by the way, and comments if you look at the thread. There's actually just a started conversation. I love this. Is there any other questions floating out there? We've got another 5 minutes, let's say. And we'd be happy to answer questions. I'll give everyone a moment to come up with something. Just reading to make sure I didn't miss anything. There's 2 questions that just came up. I'm going to do that in the order that they came up. What other questions do you ask yourself regularly? I ask the energy one a lot. What brings me energy? I really try and focus on that. I ask myself, for the sake of what? Why am I doing something? In coaching, there's something that comes up periodically in conversations with clients, which is, what rules are you following for no reason? I've been asking myself that a lot, so I feel like I'm pretty close to following just rules that I believe in for a reason. But I still try and ask myself that, what rules am I following for no reason? That'll really mess you up when you start to think about the things that you're doing and you can't explain why you're doing it. But it's a really good exercise to go through. And I think what's happening in the world, there are a lot of rules that we were following as a society that were broken almost overnight. And those have been completely shattered. Remote work won't work. We won't be as productive. It's not possible economically. It's just not going to be successful. Well, we have an answer now, right? Depending on how you want to measure the economy, we have an answer. And it's really working for the majority of white collar jobs. And actually what it's done is it's opened up a whole industry, a whole opportunity for people that have been told they can't get a job because they can't work remotely. People with disabilities have been denied work for literally ever because there are physical barriers to coming into an office, and companies are like, oh, we don't do remote work. Well, now that's BS. And so it's completely opened up an opportunity. So again, asking yourself what rules you're following for no reason can be quite illuminating. When it comes to individual customers, this is Pat, versus businesses to business. Do you see any differences in approach to gain or keep clients? B2B, sometimes you have long-term agreements that lock people in. And so there's a little less energy and retention, but you'll see some people, responding in more thoughtful ways. I think B2C, definitely more of an empathetic approach to the individual experience. B2B, a little bit more of a market approach. Are you in a market that's dramatically impacted? And really tuning your communication that way. Authentic community. So some of these questions are coming in private, and I want to answer them. So I just really quickly, to the person who has a bookstore, first email me so we can talk about this more directly, because I'd be happy to talk about it. I would say story time, virtual story time. My dad reads stories to my niece and nephew. He does virtual story time for his grandkids that he can't be around. Virtual story time I think would be huge, and parents are always looking for things for their kids to do. First startup venture. Josephine, how do I feel about my first startup venture? If I was being honest, my first startup venture was cracking rocks, like little stones on the sidewalk, and selling them for 25 cents to people who were coming at home and garden tours. And so my profit margin was high because I just picked up the stones and broke them and sold them for like 25 cents. So I felt good about that. My first revenue generating business kind of fizzled. I learned a lot. I think the biggest thing I could say is start things, build things. Things will fail. It can be because of the way that our society is built. Certain people have different bandwidth, are given different bandwidth, I should say, for failure. So I'm a straight white dude. I'm given a lot of bandwidth. I can't do anything about that. I'm just living that experience, and I acknowledge it. So I would say my relationship to failures related on my demographic, but I would say you learn the most from putting things out in the world and getting feedback from customers. And I hope that, you know, whoever starts businesses, that they're in a space where they can be given the space to fail. Marlene, any ideas for new startups to get funding during these times, loans, grants? Marlene, can you email me? Let's talk about it. Comment, Adam, I'm going to, any advice for beginning to blend professional, personal on social media? I think that the more real you are with the people that you're doing work with, the easier it is for you to be who, like, just to survive. I'm the same person with my friends and with colleagues, with strangers, with people I've known forever. It enables me to just pour my energy into my relationships and not have to think about things. I will say again, I don't live in a world where I have to be someone different. There are people, whether you're a woman, whether you're BIPOC, whether you're whatever you identify, the way that our society is built, there's definitely baggage around showing up certain ways in certain communities. And I think it's always important to acknowledge and call that out. And so that response, if to the extent that you can blend who you are in your world, I think it's great.